All right. Welcome, everybody. You're in the green room with Mark Austin today. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing good. And I think everything is working and everybody should be seeing us live. And
Okay.
if you're watching your Facebook page, you'll see that it's a little bit of a delay, but you should be able to see all the stuff that I'm doing over here. All right. So there it goes. Okay, it's working. Oh man, sometimes I tell you,
Isn't it great?
we were talking ahead of time. I get nervous. I'm so nervous these days when I'm doing these things because uh the first day I did it, I'm at day 14, right?
Wow.
And the first day I did it, I didn't care. I just did my thing and it was easy. But as I've developed and I've tried to get more professional and I've got the backdrop happening and getting my mics and my conversations. I'm starting to get even more nervous, especially when I have guests on. And I want to make sure everything goes right. And no matter what I do, I'm at the mercy of the internet. Now, you and I were having this great conversation beforehand, and I almost always, when I start these, don't want to talk to anybody until I go live, because we say so many good things before we go live that I forget what we talked about. so one thing, there's so much going on right now and so many live streams going, and the thing that I want to focus on with you, and a little bit of background before I let you talk, is Mark and I met when 80s, so 30, 35, 40, almost 35 years ago, something like that.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Mountain View, California. You were working for a company called Eagle Vision,
Right.
and you guys hired me to do some music for one of the productions you were doing for Silicon Graphics or Sun or one of those.
I think the first gig was we did a talk show, and we needed a band.
That's right.
And somebody, I don't remember who gave me your name, but we got a hold of you, and you put together a little band, and we did a corporate talk show where the executive sat behind a desk, and then you just did the Tonight Show fills and just did the regular band stuff. And from there, we went on. We did, gosh, you've worked on a couple of award-winning films that we've done, that we did at that time. Actually, several like campaigns, ads, and things like that, and produced a lot of stuff for us. And then I remember when you had the what was it, Black Market? Was it Black Market Jazz Orchestra?
Yep.
I'd go out with you guys and shoot some video of that and help you with the lighting, and I just had a blast during that whole time. I missed those days. It was it was simple, but it was fun and very rewarding.
Those were things were so different back then. And I remember the very first, you and Jeff graciously donated your time for my very first video that I did for my band. Full Motion was the name of the band.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I had dancers and all that sort of thing. And in those days, we had to shoot with real film, and we were talking about, well, should we do 35 millimeter? What kind of film are we going to shoot? And then, and this is how much things have changed, because I ended up spending like $40,000 to do what we can do for pennies today. I could almost do the same thing with an iPhone on my own today that I did back then. And you came out and you shot some B-roll you brought a little camera, handheld, shot some black and white and some color footage that looked great. That the visual of it was fantastic. And then we had to go, this is the craziness of it. And I know there are people like my children aren't even old enough to remember these days. They go, "What?" So we had to go and get the film developed. Then I had to bring it down to Eagle Vision, and you at that time had an Avid video editor. They were pretty
Right.
new,
Yeah.
and so not only did we have to get the film developed, but then we had to bring it in and get it digitized, which took a lot of time. And I had to rent hard drives. And I'll never forget driving up to this company in San Francisco, and I forget the name of the company, but I had to rent three 2 gigabyte hard drives, which they were they were so heavy I could barely carry them. And so what I had was 6 gigabyte hard drives. I mean, three 2 gigabyte hard drives that I had to bring down to Eagle Vision, and we digitized the film into those. And today, my phone, my silly little phone right here, this thing will do all of that by itself.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was crazy just thinking about those days. But they were like you said, it there was a whole production and a whole time and um, the it was almost like making a movie, which was
Oh yeah.
actually what it was.
Sure. Well, and technology has changed so much. I mean, we've heard the story 100 times about how your smartphone has the same, more technology or more capacity compute wise than the first space,
Right,
first space rocket, the launches and stuff. They put somebody on the moon with less technology than you have in your laptop.
right, right. So one thing I just want to jump right into, because you and I were talking about this, and and because my entire history with you has been talking about stories. And this is the most important thing relevant to almost everything we've done together with any kind of project. And when whether it was the silicon graphics thing that we did where you put together a, I think it was going to be for a conference that Silicon Graphics was doing. And this was at the time when they were at their peak, and they were doing the graphics for Jurassic Park. And because I remember
Right.
there was a clip from Jurassic Park in there. And they were at their peak, and we produced the movie, or you produced the movie, and I did the music for it, and it was shown at their worldwide sales conference or something like that. It was an in-house thing. But the point is, it is what you've always tried to focus me on is, what's the story do? What kind of story are you telling? And you have always been able to keep me thinking about what that is. So I want to launch that into where we're at today. I kind of want to jump right by all that and dig into your knowledge and what your expertise is and what value that has today, because we are all now jumping on this platform of live streaming, and everybody's trying to get out their music and get out their performances and how we're going to communicate and monetize it. And
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to move forward in this next 3 to 6 months, even, and even further on? How are all of us as artists going to monetize it? Who's going to get a following? Who's not? And your insights we were talking about before we went live is something that everybody needs to hear about, how to monetize and make what they're doing uh, viable to the public, or catching on.
Well, I may get in trouble, but for the last 9 years, I've been working at a big company, a technology company, and that company happens to have a subsidiary called YouTube. So I hope I don't get in trouble because you're on a different platform. So I've learned quite a bit about the monetization of programs and things through that. But I would want rewind a little bit and start with the idea. I used to teach a class at UC Santa Cruz, and I did it, I think, for 7 years. And I would start every semester of this class, and this was during the 90s, with the statement, good technology only makes bad ideas suck faster. And I think that's really important to remember, that we have a lot of good technology and we're surrounded by incredible technology. But, if you don't tell a story that is engaging, it doesn't matter how good the technology is. They used to say you can paint a rock blue, it's still a rock. Um, well, in our case nowadays, we all have the technology in our pockets to make award-winning films. Why isn't every video that someone does on their cell phone, why isn't it an award-winning film? Why doesn't everybody want to watch it? Because it doesn't really tell a story.
Mm.
You know, the idea that we need to, and like you said earlier, I always try and focus on the story part of it. And I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today, who is trying, she's an educator, talking about how to communicate on, through this technology that we're faced with now, and teach classes this way. And I said, well, go back to the idea of telling stories. You're still telling stories. If you want to tell a story, you want to have a beginning and a middle and an end. And this came about, and this brought about my recollection, and I know you appreciate this, and we talked about it offline earlier. I came to the Bay Area. I was working for essentially a circus. It was a group called Las Vegas Hallelujah. And in that show, we had an Elvis impersonator, an illusionist, a live panther, a live leopard, and a chorus line, and a couple of singers and a live band. And we went around. But the act that really punched it home for me, that taught me this whole thing about the beginning and middle and end, was in an Italian family that their entire act consisted of playing New York, New York on pots and pans. And while that sounds really kind of crazy and goofy, and it was goofy, but as I watched it, I realized that they were able to sell this act because it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. They told a story with their antics on stage, using their pots and pans and their big shoes and the way they did this. I ran into that same family years later while I was working, doing entertainment for a chain of hotels out in the South Pacific. 7 years later, I ran into the same family doing the same act. They had continued to make a living playing New York, New York on pots and pans. So, but they had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I think anybody, as long as you understand who your audience is and you can tell your story with a good beginning, set it up, a good middle, and have a resolution that, we definitely know this is the end, then you can do it. And that's part of the monetization thing, leads into that, is people are engaged by stories. They really are drawn in. If you want to get online and just talk about statistics and theories, you better have a story to compel people to watch it.
Right. And this is what one other thing that sort of occurred to me is, um, because I'm doing this, I can get people to tell a story, and I can uh, have people on that are famous or whatever it is. But you know what I'm going to have to think about? Are people going to like me? Are people going to are they going to want to tune in to me? So I need to make sure that I'm reasonably engaging and ask the right questions, and I have a personality that people might like or be drawn to. I don't or I could go to the Howard Stern direction or Rush Limbaugh, those people who just, shock jocks and try to get attention that way. I don't know if that's the kind of audience that I want to draw, but uh, from my when I'm watching musicians, for example, and they're doing their performances, and they're really great music. And if they want to build an audience, I was watching a couple of friends of mine, and they'll have 1,000 or 2,000 people that are their friends that will all tune in and watch them. And but what if they want to draw a larger audience? What if they want to draw other people in? Are they going to need to, get their surroundings set up? Are they going to need to be more of an engaging personality? How do they draw in more people and monetize it? Are you following where I'm going with that? Because
Oh yeah, yeah.
it isn't just about
You know,
it's about a story. It's about which is true, and it's about also lighting, which because you were a creative director for a theater in Phoenix for a while, right? Where it's about the set, it's about the visuals, and it's about engaging and personality. All of those things go into trying to monetize a live stream. I think. Are you following where I'm going with that?
yeah. I mean, that's going to help, but the monetization comes. People have to send in money. That's the deal. Some somewhere along the line, there has to be a financial transaction or some kind of barter. You know, moving, and I think we're going to have to find that out. You know, you might need to have the whole Jeff Noose network where you have different shows and people subscribe to the network overall, and that might be what you want. That might be an angle on this. You know, there's a lot of ways to approach this, but bottom line is that until somebody is, you can have a really good show, and if you give it away, then at some point, and you know this from the bands you did, when you have everybody wants a free band for their wedding.
Right.
They want to have Maroon 5 play at their wedding,
Right.
and and that's that just is the way people are. It's that old joke about the guy who spends 20 years learning how to play his instrument and spends $50,000 on equipment and drives it around in a $5,000 van for $50 a night.
Right.
You know, that, that's that's where we're at. But right now, and we see this all the time. I've seen this posted a couple times on Facebook. People are talking about, now that everyone's stuck at home, are people going to realize the importance of artists and musicians and actors and stuff? Because that's all we have to do. If you talk to people online, or you interact with people, most people, you say, what are you doing? Well, I'm catching up on all the reruns of The Sopranos, or I'm binge watching, whatever zombie apocalypse show that is on TV right now, or CSI, or any of the Law and Order, any of those shows. They're binge watching those things, but those are all done by actors and craftspeople who are essentially right now out of work, not doing anything.
Right.
But those people have always been thought of as the non-essential people. Well, right now in our culture, those are the ones that are keeping people from, putting their heads in the oven.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, and I've talked to a few musicians about this, is the one thing that has come up, and a little bit of light has been shown on those of us who are not famous musicians. The coffee shop, Roger Smith and I talked a little bit about this last night. The guitar player that, like you just described, he studied music forever. He went out and bought a $3,000 Martin guitar or whatever it is, and he drives it around his little pickup truck, and he goes down to the coffee shop and he plays for $50 or $100. But that's how he makes his living, and he's completely happy with it. He tries to make his own record and post gets it out, but he's happy, and that's his living, and he's been able to maintain. Now all of a sudden all of that is gone, so he has nothing. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of musicians and actors act in Los Angeles alone. Not only the famous actors, but what about all the actors that are sitting in North Hollywood in the little community playhouses studying their craft, and it's what they love and what they want to do, and they are not making a thing because a lot of times actors and musicians out of work go to work at restaurants. They become servers,
Yeah.
anything they can do. So all of it is shut down, and there is this whole group of people that people, the gigging industry, that is now becoming a little bit of light on that, but never enough. We're the first people to lose our gigs and our jobs, and the last people to get them back. So uh, how do we now? There's a little light on that now. the only way we're going to make any money or come out of that is to make ourselves known maybe on the internet somehow.
Yeah.
I,
Well, it is a time. One of the things you can look at this, and I know you've talked to a number of people about this who emphasize that this is a great opportunity to be creative. Um, there are numerous stories about Miguel Cervantes wrote Don Quixote while he was in prison. You know, we talk about for the longest time, you know, you talk about creativity and people say, yeah, I'd like to write a book. I think I could write a novel, but I don't have the time, or I don't have the right computer, or I don't have, you know, the muse or whatever it is. And those are all good excuses. Well, now no one has any excuse for not doing what they want to do, because you have the solitude, you have the, you know, we all have some sort of technology that allows us to do this, whether it's music or writing or even film. You know, there should be just a whole bunch of new creative things. And one of the things that's going to come out of this whole kind of pandemic disaster is there's going to be a whole new wave of a different kind of creativity that, and once somebody figures, like you say, once we figure out how to monetize it. And right now, nobody has got any money to spend on monetizing anything right now,
right.
because they're all terrified. And, you know, I hate to say it, but I don't think the stock market has hit the bottom yet.
No.
So, you know, you're not going to have the investment in films. You're not going to have the investments that we had in different kinds of things. But that doesn't mean that writers can't continue to write. That means that composers can't continue to compose. You know, there's just, painters can still paint. There's still a lot of things that we can do to keep our sanity, so that when we do return to some sense of normalcy, we're ahead. You're ahead. You've got this. You've got a corpus of things, a catalog of things that you're just waiting to, you know, run with. And so, the people that are going to be on the producing end are going to have this great group of materials to choose from, because everybody's going to be in a situation where they're going to have all this stuff. Hopefully, the people that are thinking ahead of the game are poised to be ready to just say, okay, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. So what do you want? And the people on the production end are going to have all kinds of chances to choose.
Well, I started doing this mainly so I could fill up my time and not think about how everything sucks. because and I've told this several times over the last couple of weeks, is the day all of my gigs started dropping like dominoes, there went my rent, there went my car payment, there went, and no way in the foreseeable future of being able to pay them. And rather than sit and spend all of my time on, I've already spent 3-4 days sitting on hold for over 2 hours just to get through to my car payment to ask for forbearance. And not once have I actually been able to get through, because after 2.5 hours, they shut the phone call off. And so I've just decided I'm the only place I'm going to pay is my rent. I'm going to, whatever I can do to pay my rent so I don't lose my home. Everything else, I'm not even going to try to call and say I can't make it, because everybody's trying that. So when I sit and think about that, I go nuts. I'm like, oh God, all I can do is think about that. And all I'm doing is trying to figure it out. When I started doing this, I completely lost that. This is keeping me sane. This is helping me stay
Yeah.
off of that. I'm communicating with people. I'm communicating with musicians. As a matter of fact, I'm spending more time communicating with people that neither one of us would have taken time to do before. 3 weeks ago, we wouldn't have sat and talked for an hour, right?
Right.
Nor would anybody sit and watch us talk for an hour. So,
Well, you know, yeah, you've hit it right on the head, you know, but keep in mind that those people at the car place, they're in the same boat that you are. This is leveled the whole playing field across the board. Nobody is immune from this, and you know, everybody is going to feel it. You're going to see car dealerships. We talk about, we know that venues and restaurants are having it tough. There aren't going to be any cars sold. There aren't
I
going to, all that stuff is going to go. It's just leveling out. And the other thing that you've really done well in this situation is uh, had this schedule. And when you say I mean, you self medicated by doing something that was really smart. When this all started, my son, who is a manager of a comedy club back in Philadelphia, here's somebody who makes his living by hosting and working with, live audiences and comedians and stuff like that. Um, he, all of a sudden, he doesn't have anything to look forward to in the day.
right.
And so I said, what you have to do is get a schedule. We're going to have a video call every day at 10 o'clock, and you got to be there because that's part of the schedule. Because if you can establish a schedule, and that's what you're doing, and that's what everybody needs to do.
Well,
I mean, we need to have some kind of normalcy.
I want you to know that the whole reason why I'm doing what I am doing is based on a conversation I had with you, I think last year when we were talking about YouTube channel and how to monetize a YouTube channel. And you told me the first thing you need to do is pick a time slot and do something and keep at it and do it, whether it's once a week or once every 2 days or whatever it is, but make it regular so people just know they can tune in and it's there. And then you develop over time a following. And at some point, if your following gets big enough, then advertisers jump in there. But when I decided to do this, how much time do I have? Well, I've got all the time in the world. So
Yeah.
so I decided, okay, Mark said set a schedule. So I told myself I'm going to do 3 and I'm going to do 8. And I'm going to do it every day for 2 weeks. And on the most part, I've kind of stuck to that. And it's completely soaked up my time so I don't pay any attention, but I think you're right because it's just now I'm starting to. The first day I had like 40 views, but now some of my interviews they start off at 300 views. And for me, I'm like, wow, this is golden. I'm nowhere near any making any money, but the fact that a few people pay attention and I have some interesting things to talk about. And uh, just for example, the one of the first ones I did with a musician was John Mater, who plays drums on Hamilton, and it was just him and I having a conversation like you and I are having. And a
Mhm.
student drummer posted, I I learned you guys drop so much information just on your conversation that it helped me a great deal. And it was just him and I talking about what it was like to play drums here and the different kind of groove there. And the conversation we're having can be really helpful to somebody who wants to sit and try a YouTube channel or Facebook Live or whatever it is themselves and maybe think about some things they wouldn't naturally think about.
Yeah, I mean, and you can apply that to all kinds of things. There are people out there who say, "Well, I'm not creative," and I go, "Okay, well, there's a lot of people that consider themselves not creative, but they're really good cooks. That is a very creative endeavor. In fact, that's one of those things that I find myself engaged in. Cooking, like you say, rather than do a show, I'll cook dinner, and I might cook something really nice, something fancy, or try and remember what something tasted like at Spago's and try and recreate that with what I with my can of beans and rice from what we've got. But everybody has to find a voice. You know, everyone has some sort of creativity. Everyone has some sort of story to tell. There are people who don't consider themselves great artists. You don't have to be a great artist, but you paint for yourself. A lot of writers write for themselves, and it just so happens that a lot of people like what they write. A lot of musicians, you don't compose, you don't sit down and say, I'm going to write this song for Wisconsin. because Wisconsin likes cheese music. No, you're going to write a song because it moves you. And if it just so happens that people in Wisconsin or Montana or North Dakota like this song, so much the better. But you have to start, they say when you write, you should write what you know. Well, I think it's a little deeper than that. It's write what you feel. I think that's what it really is about. Same thing with painting or music. Play what you feel. I've struggled for years. My first instrument was accordion when I was 5. And I've told this story to a lot of my friends. 5 years old, my parents fell prey to a traveling accordion salesman, and they sold them an accordion, a full size, the big accordion. And I think I had 2 lessons before the guy skipped town, kind of like the Music Man. So I knew how to play volare, and I knew at age 5 I was not going to get any girls with the accordion. So one morning I strapped on my accordion, and mind you, I had to put it rested on my feet, and my eyes were like this over the top of the bellows, so it was like this. And I kicked the door open to my parents' bedroom and waddled in playing volare to my parents at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they sold the accordion that following Monday. But after that, I started saxophone, and I knew that my chances with the girls were a little bit better with sax, and then learned how to play, guitar. And this is all growing up in Montana. And the point of my story is all throughout my whole life, I've always been involved in music and always had, music in my life, but I've never really discovered what my voice is. I've never really felt that I had a good grasp of what my instrument was musically. And it wasn't until I started writing scripts and screenplays and stuff like that, that I felt like I had discovered my voice. And while it's not musical, I get to work with people like yourself, and I can speak the language of music now. So it helped me that way. I'd still love to know whether or not I'm more of a blues guy or a country guy, because I both of them, I'm not very good at either one. Although I think my heart's more in the blues than it is in the country.
Well, you did. I remember you had me do some music, and while you were talking, a couple of things came up. You had me do bad. You remember we did "Bad to the Bone," and
Oh yeah.
we called it "Cad to the Bone."
Well, it was Silicon Graphics.
Right.
My friend Joe DiNucci, he lives up the road from me here. He was the lead singer for that, and Joe is, just a dear friend. But that all came about, and we did that music video, "Cad to the Bone," because they were really computer-aided design was a big deal for Silicon Graphics, and it worked well.
Yeah.
But that was
Now, something else you brought up about cooking, and I got to tell you, you remember, and it never took off, but the lady that was going to do the cooking and sex, it was going to be HBO. Now, wait, let me set this up. So the first show, the premiere show, was a woman covered in food, and you couldn't see her, but as people ate the food away, this naked lady emerged, and that was the start. And and I couldn't be there. I was going to do the music for it, but I so badly wanted to be there to watch the filming of it.
Oh. Well, that's a great story too, because it's a good education in production, because everyone thought that was a brilliant idea. The concept was food and sex, and our hostess, Marianne, what's cooking with Marianne?
Mm-hmm.
The concept was she was going to do some sexy recipes in the kitchen with a guy and wearing nothing but an apron, and they were going to cook up some different dishes that, there was pasta puttanesca, and we heard the history of pasta puttanesca. And then she did it, person on the street interview, and she talked about, tell me about your relationship with food and sex. Where was the first place you went out on a date? Those kinds of things. And then there was an interview with a psychiatrist or a sex therapist or something like that. And then there were these elements of, kind of the perversions, or not perversions, but the unique concepts of food and sex, and that's where the orgy with the lady and the whipped cream came in. And I remember pitching that show, sitting at Maple Drive in L.A., pitching that show to the head of HBO, and everybody loved the show. And this is a good lesson for anybody who's really, and I hope this doesn't discourage you, but one of the things that we pitched to HBO, and I've got letters of rejection from some of the most brilliant people. Playboy Network loved the idea, HBO loved the idea, Showtime loved it. Even what was it? The company, and there was a Chicago-based company that loved the idea, but only one person actually came out and told me what the problem was. And they said, "Well, we love the show, but the hostess, we want to put a different hostess in because she doesn't have any background. We can't market a show with someone who no one has ever heard of."
Oh.
So I went to Marianne and I said, "Here's the deal. You can retain the power and produce the show and make all the money off of it. And we get a hostess," because Playboy said they wanted to put in a Playboy bunny into the show as, the host of the show, because the Playboy bunny, they've got cachet and they've got all this stuff going already. They've already been established as somebody they didn't want to market somebody from scratch. They didn't want to have to build that up. And so I told Marianne, I said, you can host, you can get the money and produce it. In other words, you get the money and the power, or you can do it another way. You can be the hostess and not make any money and have the power, in which case it's going to go on public access, or you can try and do all things yourself and you're probably not going to make any money. So those kinds of things. And this is all what I learned from this is that the big production companies all needed a bankable star. Mm. And particularly in Hollywood, it's not so much, I mean, if you look around, anybody who has ever been on the cover of a DVD or a magazine, they've already been established. They have a certain bankable value. You talk to an actor, even some of your actor friends there in LA, the ones who have done been the third body from the left on Criminal Minds, they have more of a marketable value than someone who has never appeared anywhere.
Right.
So they kept saying that she had to beef up her resume, and by that they meant she needed to basically establish a market, her marketability by doing something other than the show first. So you look at Oprah. Oprah had done, a number of different things and kind of did them simultaneously. She built her resume as an actress as well as a talk show host at the same time. That's not to say in your case, you have the advantage that you actually have some people that you're talking to that are going to draw on your audience. And that's where your bankability comes in, is you're talking to people who have a following, who have the audience. So you can build your audience that way.
Right. And I do have to say, and I want to just put this out there, that I have nobody, I know a lot of people, but nobody knows me. Nobody's going to tune in because I'm just talking on a podcast or a live stream. And I know that. I've never spent any time trying to build anything up. But the people I have on are people that are famous. I mean, I famous, and by me saying famous is when I look at their friends on Facebook, they have 4,000 or 5,000 friends. I've got 800. I've never paid any attention to it. So, excuse me. So if I'm doing something and want to build an audience, the more of those people I have on that have 4,000 or 5,000 friends, then they all start tuning in. And as long as I'm not too obnoxious and people kind of are okay with me talking, maybe I'll build an audience. But I think anybody who wants to monetize a live stream or make money off of this, if you're, let's say you're just a solo musician and you want to get people to tune into you and sell a record, how do you do that? By just doing a live stream. How do you get other people to see you on YouTube or on Facebook? Somehow you have to attract people to yourself. And
Well, you hit it right on the head there. And so if you're a musician who doesn't have a record deal or something, um, if I'm a musician and I definitely don't have a record deal, but I come on and do a song on the Jeff News show, and you have 1,000 followers, that those 1,000 people are going to hear, and maybe 30 of them like it. Well, combine that with my sister and my friends who happen to like it. Now I'm up to 35 people who like it. Well, every time I make an appearance, and you are the catalyst for helping these people grow. So it's not going to be just about, for you, you will build their careers faster than they will just by themselves. So you're the one that's going to be the leverage, the springboard for a lot of these musicians. If you know the guy that does original music and is down busking at the pier in Santa Monica, and you have him on the show doing a couple of his live songs, all of a sudden he's going to build his following, because the people that you have built up as your audience all of a sudden now are going to, hey, I like this guy. I've been working on a project here. I live in Los Gatos, California, and I live in the redwood trees in a place that they call the tree house. I don't. Someday I'll take you and give you a tour around the treehouse on your next show.
right.
But it's got a big deck, and my friend and I put a concert on the treehouse, and we had about 70 people. Did a house show, and he did all original music, and he gets, he got the proceeds from the donations. He made about $400 off the donations for that 1 hour performance. Well, the way it worked was he brought about half the audience, and then we brought about half the audience. Well, when he walked away, he had doubled the size of his audience. Plus, he made $400, and that's where you're at. You're the venue now. You are the venue for a lot of new people. And if you think about it that way, you're going to be able to not only build your audience, but you're going to help them build their audience.
Well, that's, when I started doing this a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I know from a few people there was some hesitation because they have their own thing, and no, I want to have my audience, and what am I doing with you? And maybe, I want to make sure I do my own thing. And I think that as we all go and we get going through this, is that staying isolated on your own live stream is not going to help your audience grow as much as you collaborating with everybody else that is trying to do the same thing. And I don't care
Yep.
if you get successful or not coming on my show. I mean, if I can help you. So let's say, for example, I find Joe Schmo down on Santa Monica Pier, and he comes on, and I'm like, hey, this is about me having a conversation with you, and I want people to hear your story about where you're at. And then I have my buddy Tom with Tower of Power, who's got 4,000 or 5,000 followers that see that. And all of a sudden they start looking into him. If I'm a conduit for other people's voice, that's beautiful. I mean, that would be the best that could come of this. I haven't been, my intention to start this wasn't necessarily to make money, but my intention was to give myself something to do. So
Right.
if then I set the secondary intention of giving everybody a place to let their voice be heard, and then have all of those different groups of people's followers cross section of each other start seeing each other, then their audiences have grown. So my comment to everybody out there that might be listening is, when I ask you to do an interview with me, say yes. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything. Worst case scenario is I'll say something stupid and people are like, oh, that guy's dumb. I mean, that's the worst thing.
Well,
I'm not going to damage anybody's career.
Well, it's interesting because the people that want to do it in isolation because they're afraid you're going to steal their idea or
Right.
you're going to steal some of their audience, they've got the complete wrong attitude. They might as well lock themselves in a room and they're going to perform for themselves their entire life. Anyone who wants to get out, this is not the new norm, but this is a new aspect of where we're going with all this. If you're going to perform for yourself, then why? I mean, I said earlier that you want to write music for yourself, write stories for yourself, and share them. But what I didn't get to was the fact that you eventually do want to share all this stuff.
Right.
And if you don't want to share it, then why are you creating it? Is it just, and I'm going to use this and they'll probably kick us off Facebook, but it's just, it's masturbation at that point. Well, if you're not going to share your talents, then you're just, it's sad. It's sad. But I think you got a good thing going. And you, more than anyone who has started this and that I know of, there's a lot of people who say, yeah, I want to do a show. And they go, but I don't have enough money, but I don't have this, I don't have that. You started with, what you had and have created something. Now you're going on 2 weeks, and that's now how many 20 shows you've done, or I don't know.
I've done
How many
I've done a dozen pretty good ones. Yeah.
Well, just all told, I mean, that right there is more than most people who aspire to do this stuff. Everybody talks about it, but you're doing it. So that's the biggest thing.
Well, I got to, it's nerve wracking. I'm fearful. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. When I jumped into this, I started talking, and I'm thinking, what if somebody is tuning in, and what am I going to say? And I get concerned about offending people, and I finally had to just decide it doesn't matter. I'm just going to have to be me, and people are, if they like me, they'll tune in. If they don't like me, they won't. And I've wanted to offer a lot of different things that people are friends that want to talk about things. And I got to say that the first one that I did was with a guy by the name of Jim Buck, a guitar player out in Vegas, the amazing guitar player, and loved, and you called in on.
I called in the middle of that. I didn't realize you were doing the show. I ended up being your first call-in guest.
But you were my first call-in guest, and I got to say that on that show, he said, "I have all of this music that I've written, and now I have time to get to it." And then just a couple of nights ago, he started his own little in the coffee shop with Jim Buck, and he's playing all of his original music. And that alone was the catalyst, the inspiration for us all to do this. If I can help with that, and I'm going to have him back on Saturday, and hopefully now more people will be able to tune in and hear his songs. I mean, he's a great guy, and he's got cool songs. And that first song he played, I haven't been able to stop singing. Da, 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 da. And I just keep singing it in my head. It's a good song. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing, and I got to tell you that I was, and because we're friends and this is how we talk, it's like in the green room. This is how we would be talking before we go on the show. I have doubts every time I get on, and I'll look and I'll see I had maybe 80 views, and then I'll look at a friend and he's got 1,000, and I'll go, nobody. It's really easy to get discouraged, and it's really easy to feel like nobody cares or nobody's listening, but I can't let that prevent me from doing it, because again, my initial reasoning for doing this is just giving myself something to do. And in that I am accomplishing. I have so filled up my time from morning to night that I don't have time to think about anything other than taking care of my daughter, fixing food, and doing my shows. And I'm not thinking about anything else, and it's actually made me really happy.
Well, I've noticed the change. I've noticed the change from your first show when I called in accidentally. That was, I thought, oh, I'm going to give Jeff a call here. And here I am calling. I look online, and there I am talking to you and Jim. And that was hilarious. Well, one of the things that I think is really important is even if nobody's watching, it gives you and I time to catch up and reminisce on some of the, the times. And we haven't even touched on a lot of the stuff. I mean, the shows and the adventures that we've had over the last 30 years, it's been fun,
It
and we've had ups and downs. We've both gone through various relationship challenges and all kinds of things. Our kids are, doing well. I know you've got one that's on. Are both your kids on the East Coast now?
My son is in Phoenix, and
Oh,
my
okay.
my oldest is in New York City, and her main gig is one of the front of house sound mixers for Chicago on Broadway. And
Oh,
the
okay.
good news for her is that's such an institution that she's in a local that she's taken care of pretty much while they're dark. You know what?
Right.
So she's doing really well. She's only 28, and I couldn't be prouder. But now your son, and this is one thing that I want to get on here, and it's not just musicians, and it's not just the spiritual people that I'm having on because they're a big part of agape, which you're familiar with. But I want to get some comedians on. And your
Yeah.
son has a comedy club in Philadelphia.
Well, he is assistant manager of Helium Comedy Club in Philly, and he's got, not only does he have a lot of stories, but one of his roommates is a comedian there in Philadelphia. And I remember the first time. Now this is how it started. He went to school at Drexel in Philly and got his degree in philosophy. So what do you do with a degree in philosophy? You run a comedy club, right? It makes perfect sense. So, but I remember when he first went back east and went to school, and he calls me up. I'm in California and he's in Philly, and he calls me up, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And immediately, as a parent, you go, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And I answer the phone and go, "What's up?" And he goes, "Dad, I just had the best time. I stayed up all night drinking with this guy." And he goes, "Do you know who Bert Kreischer is?" And I go, "No." And he says, "Did you ever see the movie Van Wilder?" And I go, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, it's the guy they based the movie Van Wilder on." So my son had stayed up all night, basically drinking with the Machine. And if anybody is out there knows this, the story of the Machine, you're going to have to look it up on YouTube. It's one of the funniest comedy bits I've ever seen. Well, that sucked my son into the whole world of comedy. He's not a comedian, although he's really funny, and he probably could be. He's more of a storyteller. But as it turned out, a couple years later, we ended up drinking shots of tequila with Bert Kreischer in Philadelphia at my daughter's graduation from college. So all these things, so he's somebody who has got, you know, a lot of stories and can tell you kind of the behind the same things that we talk about with music and production from the comedy world, because he's been doing it since he moved back there. He's been working in that club and worked his way up to assistant manager. And they're dark now. He's been laid off, but
Mm.
the club is, they're doing what they can. And this is a good, once again, it's everybody's in the same boat. So as much as we can collaborate and corroborate all of these different stories and make it all real for each other, the best. It's for the best. It's all for the best.
Yeah, so I just want to interject here because now I'm looking. Seems that the audio is really clear coming from this live stream, but it seems like the audio is off from our images, right? So the
Out of sync.
yeah, it's out of sync, and I don't have no idea how to correct that. It's an internet thing as far as I can tell. Do you know anything about what causes that?
Yeah, it's an encoder thing. Um,
Mm.
we could stop down the show and start over, and it might be also that we've gone past their maximum resolution, because at some point it'll lose sync. It may be the kind of thing with this application that you're using, that it stays in sync for the first 10 minutes and then it drifts.
Oh, what one guy just said, I'm getting great sync today. So it oh, is it him or is our feed getting great sync? Is he watching and it's syncing up? I don't know, but this is one thing that I do know is that the audio is clear, and if somebody wanted to just listen, I mean, there's good information. They don't necessarily have to look at our faces. Yeah, who wants to look at my face? But see,
Probably better.
right. So that's other good knowledge that we've been trying to tackle with other guests on the show is how all of this works. And because you have an involvement um, uh, with YouTube, does the YouTube platform scrunch the bandwidth as it comes in, or as much as Facebook seems to? I know you can't really talk about this, right?
I love the technical term scrunch.
Well, you know what I'm saying. It's compression. It compresses it.
Compression.
Overload.
That's the word.
So
Yeah.
it compresses the signal so it doesn't overload the feed, right? And
Right.
so if our video is too clear and the audio is too big, it inundates the bandwidth that goes into the live stream. So they have built-in compressors that squish it down so it will fit into that tube and it'll fit better. And as that
Right.
happens, our quality goes down, especially when
Right.
everybody's trying to funnel their stuff into that tube. Is that a good way to
Right.
describe it?
Yeah, that's basically it. You do have a hose, and you got to get, you know, the all the stuff through the same hose.
Right.
You got to bring the video in through the hose and the audio fit through the hose, and you know that video takes up a lot more bandwidth than audio.
Mm-hmm.
So the more and it's fairly simple video. We don't have a lot of action and stuff, and those are all technical things that you'll experiment and figure out. But I'm excited to see. The other thing is go back and look at the recording of this after the show's done and check it out. Do a little Q&A or quality assurance after the program, and then you can determine if you need to do something different.
Yeah, well, John suggested that when I do these now, the image, as I'm looking on my Facebook, the image is crystal clear. And
yeah, the image is good.
And the audio is
other than the old guy that you're talking to.
You almost for a minute you look like George Lucas.
Oh shit.
just make your hair just a little bigger.
Well, who are they going to sue us for impersonating a celebrity?
Yeah, of course. So the image and the audio are pretty good. So that I'm wondering if YouTube's platform doesn't allow and have a little bit better quality bandwidth than what Facebook has. I don't know, because I want to shift to YouTube at some point, but I don't want to do it unless I have a certain amount of audience.
Well, I think you're going to build it both ways. When I know that years ago, before Facebook had their video applications, they really built the audience for YouTube, using Facebook. Because if you remember back in the old days, whenever there was a video posted, it was a link to YouTube.
Right. Yes.
And so they got tired of basically making YouTube rich and came up with their own video, application.
Right. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the live stream button on YouTube is pretty new and recent. For up until recently, you couldn't just click on your channel and hit live stream. Is that true?
It's been around for a couple of years.
Oh, it has. Oh, okay. All right. Well,
yeah, it's been around for a while. There's all kinds of platforms, and I think what you're going to want to do is figure out, maybe what you do is you parse it out so that you do a teaser on Facebook and then do the complete show on YouTube.
And is it easy? Well, see, this is all new to me, and I'm still learning. So, is it easy for people to tune into? How easy is it to people to see? Oh, here's your live stream YouTube channel.
Oh, you can post a link to YouTube from your Facebook.
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay.
So, where you've got all the comments, or at the beginning of the show, you can just say, okay, here we go. We're going to post a link to YouTube from, here. So here, good sync today. I'm reading some of the comments myself.
Right. Yeah, I have to ask
Well,
questions that make the audience feel like they're a part of the conversation. So, yeah, so where'd you get your shirt, man?
well,
How do you
I have the comment from the comment. I love the comment from Angela, who says, "Why do you know so many people behind the scenes?" Well, it's because he's been behind the scenes for his entire career, or in the pit, in the orchestra pit. So when you're in the pit, the only other people you know are the other snakes that are, in the pit with you.
right? And here's another one. I'm gonna have a guy on, and he doesn't know it yet, but I know he'll say yes. But there's a guy that
He doesn't.
every time Oscar season rolls around and they shine the light down into the pit and they show the band, there's a couple of guys sitting there that are really good friends and of mine. And a quick story about him, and then we're at an hour. But this is my daughter has my same sense of humor. So before Michaela moved to New York City, she took a White Christmas tour where she was the A2, and her job, the A2 on these Broadway shows, is to go and put the microphones up and make sure the band is all in sync and everything. So they're at the Pantages in Los Angeles here, and there's this particular trumpet players there, and she said, "Do you know so and so?" And I go, "Yes," and I she goes, "Okay, I'm going to give him some shit." I go, "Perfect." And then in case he looks at you funny, you can tell him you're my daughter. So they do the rehearsal, and she goes at the end of the rehearsal and she puts a microphone up. She goes, "Okay, that was a great rehearsal. Now don't fuck up the show." And he looks at her like really kind of funny, and she goes, "Yeah, I'm just teasing with you. My dad is Jeff Noose." And he goes, "Oh, okay, and I get your humor." So it was kind of funny but that's how the kind of humor I use to get loosen people up to interact with me when I'm doing when I'm a sound guy. But back to your point, is those from my perspective in my work, I've always known all these people that are never the stars. The people you
Right.
see on stage, I don't know, I may not be friends with them, but I know everybody around them because of my involvement. And that's sort of the same with you.
Well, yeah, but over the last 9 years, I've been kind of in a situation where I've got to. I mean, I've got to work. They used to say that there's 6 degrees of separation, the old Kevin Bacon thing.
Right.
I've gotten to work with so many, interact with so many celebrities. I remember years ago, Martha Stewart came to Google, and she spent a half hour flirting with me before she went on. And of course, it's understandable. She just got out of jail, so she wanted to, hang out with some guys. But I've been so fortunate that I've got to work with celebrities and foreign dignitaries. I have behind the scenes stories of all kinds of people. One of my favorite people to meet was Gina Davis, who I thought was brilliant and beautiful, and eye to eye. I'm 6 foot tall, and I'm looking eye to eye with Gina Davis and going, "Oh my God, you are flawless."
I,
And it's not just Hollywood makeup.
no.
She was funny and charming, and so the only person I've ever been starstruck by was a guy named Stuart Brand. And Stuart Brand, you don't remember him, and this is going to segue into my final little bit here. Stuart Brand was the guy who worked on the Whole Earth catalog, I believe, back in the '60s, and he was part of the Merry Pranksters.
Mm.
And that was Ken Kesey's group that was famous for the electric Kool-Aid acid test and all of those things. And so that was the only person I've ever been starstruck. Al Gore, Hillary, all of the superstar presidents and those guys, they're all just people like we are, but to me he was something special. So that leads me into the last thing I want to tell you about. And where I live in Los Gatos, I'm on Lexington Reservoir, about 2 miles from a world famous venue that was really famous in the 60s and 70s called Chateau Liberty. And it is just up the road, what you can't get into it; it's closed down. But there's a guy here in town who's making a documentary about Chateau Liberty, and I'm going to see if I can't connect you with him because he will have some great stories about the early days of the Doobie Brothers. They were the house band there, and it's got an amazing history. So that's where I'm going to leave you, and I'm right next door. So there you go.
Fantastic. Well, I know that we've actually had a consistent handful of people throughout the entire show. So somebody has listened and gotten something out of this, I hope. And Mark, thank you so much for coming on. And I know that there was so much information. I've already learned a lot from it, and I hope that other people learn something too. And I'm going to close up the show the way I usually do, and with my favorite band, Tower of Power. And I'm going through the whole run of the. I'm at some point I'll have all the rhythm section on. So um,
Well, I saw Tower of Power performing with Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes at the Keystone in Palo Alto. That's last
Keystone.
time.
Woo!
So, throwback.
That's way back. All right, so here we go. Out with Tower of Power, and I'll talk to you on the backside. Thank you, Mark.